Can Battlefield 2042 actually make a comeback? I'm LevelCap, and today I want to discuss the interesting effects of 2042's Season 1 update and what the future for the game may or may not hold. The game's worst case scenario has always looked very realistic and unfortunately extremely dire for the franchise, but given the reception to Season 1 so far, its best case scenario might not be that unrealistic. I want to talk about both of these scenarios, and before we get into that, I have a quick word from today's sponsor. What is a VPN really? In a nutshell, it's a secure connection that prevents outsiders from seeing your traffic or IP addresses, and that's about it. And while that is incredibly useful on its own, most VPN providers don't provide you any sort of additional securities that would prevent hackers from getting a virus on your computer or getting keyloggers installed and taking your valuable information. And that's why today's sponsor, NordVPN, offers more than just a highly secure VPN network with over 5,500 servers around the world. They also have threat protection that blocks viruses, trackers, and malicious websites. Their services work on all your devices from your PC to your cell phone without slowing down your internet connection, which is great if you just want to stream video or play video games. It's 2022, the era of big tech, hackers, and governments taking all of your data. So why are you letting them? Get NordVPN's exclusive deal. It's risk-free with Nord's 30-day money-back guarantee. Just go to nordvpn.com/levelcapgaming. And if you want to take it a step further, Nord also offers NordPass, which automatically generates highly secure passwords for all of your online accounts. Again, just head to nordvpn.com/levelcapgaming and start securing your devices today. Alright, getting back into the future of Battlefield 2042. First things first, well, we're about 3 weeks into Season 1. Players received the very first injection of new content for the game since its launch in November of last year. And obviously that's an extremely long time, and since that launch we've seen the player count for the game drop to an insanely small number, making it almost impossible to play it off-peak hours, and even in ideal situations the mode variety was extremely limited unless you wanted to play against bots. The game's future has looked pretty dire to say the least. With a long delay to the start of their first season and an underwhelming quantity of content delivered, one would certainly expect there to be almost no resurgence in the player count. However, that's not exactly what's happened with the game, and if I'm being honest, I'm actually surprised by how many players have come back and are sticking around to keep filling the servers weeks after this Season 1 content launch. Now, it's not to say that Battlefield 2042 is making a massive comeback or anything like that. The player count on Steam jumped from around 2,000 to 3,000 daily concurrent peak players to around 14,000 daily peak, which still didn't surpass Steam's Battlefield 5 player numbers, which are around 20 to 16k peak concurrent. It should also be noted that the 2042 player count is steadily declining as well. Over the course of 3 weeks since Season 1 dropped, that 14k concurrent has dropped back down to around 7 to 8k concurrent. And again, Steam doesn't represent the player counts from Origin, Xbox, or PlayStation, so it's not an accurate representation of total players, but it's at least a way to gauge the game's popularity to other games and Battlefield 5. Now, what I find so interesting about this Season 1 update is that the new content really is, well, minuscule. The single new map, however, is quite good. It's not the best map ever, but it's really the first map in 2042 that plays like a traditional Battlefield map, and what it has shown is that despite the gimmicky specialist and other weird aspects of Battlefield 2042, when the game is given a competent map, it's extremely fun to play. And this is probably one of the most important realizations that can be made, because up until this point, all the maps in 2042 were massive departures from the traditional map design, and while there's been many things that made the launch experience poor, it seems like the map design might actually be one of the most important elements. Considering what could be viewed as a pitiful amount of content, the exposure map has actually kept thousands of players engaged in the game for weeks. That, plus the seasonal progression system being one of DICE's first competent progression systems, it certainly made me wonder, well, what happens when the game actually fixes its base game maps and injects more new maps and more content? If Season 1 had dropped with 3 new maps instead of just 1, would way more players have come back? It's certainly fun to wonder about these scenarios, and I think we should take a look at the best and worst case scenarios of what's in store for Battlefield 2042. I've definitely seen a lot of rumblings about how DICE is basically just going to drop this game as soon as they possibly can. And the worst case scenario is that DICE really is planning to get 2042's first year of content out the door with the lowest cost and effort possible. The things that they've officially committed to is 3 more specialists, 3 more progression trees, at least 2 more map reworks, at least 1 more new map since they guaranteed new locations, and some portal weapons coming over from the base game and a specialist rework. Now, if DICE actually only did this bare minimum, well, it would not be good and the game would not make a comeback. However, more realistically, and what I often see as speculated for the future content, is that DICE will add 1 more map per season and a few new guns/vehicles and a single map rework per season. This again could be viewed as more of a bare minimum approach to strike a balance between damage control and meeting the legal obligations based on what they sold in the game packages. Now, seeing as that one competent map has brought many players a lot more enjoyment with the game, so what does 4 seasons of content with this plan actually look like? Assuming that the map reworks are great and all the new maps are also great, Season 1 will leave the game with 2 good maps, Exposure and the reworked Kaleidoscope, and well, 6 bad to mediocre maps. Season 2 would add 1 more good map and the rework of Renewal, bringing us to 4 potentially good maps and 5 mediocre maps. Season 3, say it reworks Hourglass, would add another new map and the game would then have 6 good maps and 4 meh maps. Season 4 could rework, say, Orbital and add another new map, and then the game would have 8 good maps and 3 okay maps, at which point the 3 lesser maps would be like Breakaway, Discarded, and Manifest. And of course, along with this would be a few new specialists, new vehicles, and weapons. This is what I would consider to be a more realistic bad case scenario for the game, and there would also be a specialist rework at some point along the way. This is what I would consider to be more of a bad case scenario for the game. It certainly wouldn't give the game some sort of content-rich utopia, but it would probably be a game in which you could hop on and have some fun with an okay variety of maps that play decently well. That means that the game would offer some decent incremental updates for about a year, probably surpassing Battlefield 5's player count at some point. I'm sure some people would feel that the game had made a decent change, but I would imagine that the majority of the community would still feel that it ended up being one of the lesser titles in the franchise. Now again, this is what I consider to be a realistic bad case scenario for the game, and I personally don't think it's going to be quite that dire. Why don't we look at what I consider to be a realistic best case scenario for Battlefield 2042? DICE has officially stated recently that hundreds of employees are working on Battlefield 2042 and that the majority of DICE is working on the game and that it's the studio's only focus right now. And if this is in fact true and not just corporate rhetoric, then I would expect considerably more new maps in future seasons. Assuming that Season 1's minuscule content drop was due more to the company fixing tons of bugs and performance issues from launch and the massive workflow shifts and company reorganizations, then I would assume we would get more content in Season 2. Perhaps 2 to 3 brand new maps like classic remasters. Everyone likes remasters. I get all excited thinking about a new Wake Island, a Strike at Karkand, or Operation Metro. They could also re-inject 6 to 8 classic weapons. They already mentioned porting some of this stuff over from Portal, so it would be nice to see a big classic weapon injection. Marketing Season 2 as a classic theme would actually get the veteran players back and provide a good amount of content for new players as well. I would imagine that combined with the specialist rework and the renewal rework could be viewed as a 2042 turning the corner moment. It would almost certainly come with a much bigger player base return and sustained interest, especially if Season 1's progression was still accessible at that point. It could offer many layers of progression for returning players to work on. Season 3 could bring more quality of life updates, 2 new maps with 2 new reworks instead of just 1, and a heavy hitting weapon injection, say 10 new primary weapons and 3 new secondaries. It might sound like a lot, but I mean, look at Battlefield 4's content rollout. They really spoiled us with tons of weapons and maps with just about every single DLC. And Season 4 could certainly bring a lot more of that, both on the map and weapon content, while also injecting some exciting new ideas or major updates. A big portal and or server overhaul with clean and understandable rules for getting server XP while playing classic maps and modes, a server rental program, a server browser, better flight controls, new matchmaking options and tools to see what's popular and avoid maps you don't want to play. There's plenty of stuff that this game could still do to make the overall experience a lot better. And if DICE can effectively monetize their seasonal content and Battle Pass stuff to bring the cash flowing, maybe by this time they could even announce more seasons beyond just Season 4. Now, obviously, this is just my opinion of what a realistic good case scenario for the game could be. Things could always be better, but considering how they started off, I find it hard to realistically see the game getting a even better future than what I just mentioned. And of course, there's all kinds of wildcards and things that DICE could do to try and re-engage public interest, but I think the strongest way forward is to build and strengthen the core game instead of focusing on goofy modes or content that's not really designed to last. Now, if I'm being totally honest with myself, I think the reality of 2042's future probably lies somewhere between my realistic bad case scenario and the realistic best case scenario. I do believe some of what DICE has said about having a lot of dedicated people still working on the game and that they really want to make this a good game and do the franchise justice. But at the same time, it's hard to ignore the extremely slow pace of content that the team has been generating. Season 2 will probably set a more realistic tone for what to expect with Battlefield 2042's future. Will we get a massive content injection, or will it just be the one map, one rework that I think a lot of people are expecting? What do you guys think about the future for this game? To me, Season 1 shows that the game could make a comeback given enough content and base game reworks. I'm having fun, and many other players are having fun with the new map because, well, it's a good map and the base mechanics of 2042 actually seem to work out pretty well. I think at this point it's merely a question of if DICE will be able to deliver enough content. Their studio is without question different now. Completely new management and work structures have been put into place in the past 6 months, so it's anyone's guess what this new DICE will be able to deliver. I'd love to hear your thoughts about the future of Battlefield 2042 in the comments. As always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. This is Level Cap signing off.